Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Open Line. I'm your host, D'Destin Kaufmann, and tonight we are going to be discussing the topic that frankly makes my stomach sick and hurts my heart. And that is the topic of animal abuse. Joining me this evening, I have three wonderful guests that have decided to come in and take me through this awful, awful thing. To my right is Julia Palmer. She is the president and CEO of Capital Area Humane Society. Thank you very much for being here. To her right is Ann Burns. She is the interim director at the Ingham County Animal Control and Shelter. And finally is Jeffrey Cruz. He is the assistant prosecutor for Ingham County. So thank the three of you very, very much for being here. I guess if we could start by just going and telling how you got involved in this area of the animal world, and maybe what your specific passion within it is. You can go ahead and start if you like.
Well, thank you. Actually, I've been in animal welfare for about 20 years. So I've been at Capital Area Humane Society for 15 of those 20 years. So I actually entered the field through the medical aspect. I was in the spay-neuter clinic and I had a passion for spay-neuter. So I'm a licensed veterinary nurse, and I started out in the spay-neuter clinic at the shelter, and eventually over time worked my way into the position I have now, which is president and CEO.
Very good. Well, it's a great shelter you guys run over
Thank you.
there. And you, how did you get started?
I have been in animal control for about 15 years. I've been at Ingham County for a little over 2. Before that, I came from another county. My background, I guess this was my destiny to be in this business because I was born around animals and I don't know a life without animals.
Yeah.
I love animals, and I got into this hoping to make a difference. And hopefully I do make a difference.
Well, I'm sure that you do. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Jeffrey, dig in.
I'm an assistant prosecutor in Ingham County. I came to do what I do. I specialize. Mr. Dunning's the elected prosecutor in this area. He gave me a particular position of dealing specifically with animal crimes in Ingham County. And I gathered expertise in this field by accident. I love animals. When I was a little boy, I had my first pet was a boxer turtle named Herculina. It was actually Hercules, but it turned out it was a female, so we called her Herculina. And it was a dogfighting case, and the defendant's name was Delton Jones. And it was sitting on the docket for a while, and I decided to try it. And the former director of animal control, Jamie McLoone-Lampton, I spent a lot of time with her, developed a lot of inside information, and since then, this person was convicted of dogfighting at trial. And since then, I've done quite a few of the animal abuse and neglect cases, and in our office in Ingham County, that is my specialty. I do everything else, like every other attorney in our office, along with domestic violence, drinking and driving, homicides, but each of us has a specialty, and animal abuse is my specialty.
Very good. Well, thank you for being here. I know that Mr. Dunnings is passionate about animal abuse cases, and when I first learned that, I was very, very happy about that. I guess to get started, maybe we can, and whoever wants to jump in, feel free. Maybe we can just do an overview of what constitutes animal abuse, because as we were talking earlier, you think of animal abuse, somebody beating an animal, but animal abuse is so much broader of a topic than that. So maybe you can, from a legal standpoint, where's the line drawn?
All right, there are two things we look at in Michigan. I can bring up specifically. We have the Michigan criminal statutes, that's the legislature passing laws, and the Ingham County Board, and they have their own separate laws. There are misdemeanors and felonies. Animal abuse can encompass many things, as you mentioned. It can include not only physically abusing a dog, say with a bat, hammer, kicking them, starving them, not feeding them correctly, not tethering them with a long enough tether, keeping them in the cold or freezing weather, not giving them water, proper nourishment, those sorts of things.
Right.
So it's a very large, and then you go into, when you have more other domesticated animals, when you go into cattle, those sorts of things, cutting off tails and doing things like that, those also can be crimes.
Yes. So it was my understanding, though, that you were allowed to keep a dog on a chain in the cold weather because it's an animal. If you look at dogs that are on farms, they're just running free. So where's the difference there as far as?
The difference, I'd have to look correctly, but I believe you have to have a tether on the animal that it's, and you can correct me, that it has to be at least 3 times the length of a dog. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
So I've never personally prosecuted one of those. What I typically do is I deal a lot with people who are starving animals, improper nourishment, abandoning them, killing them. We had, if you recall here, we had a very large case that was not only nationwide, but it was worldwide. It
Yeah.
was in the newspapers in China, Bulgaria, and that was this MSU medical student who killed about 15 Italian greyhounds. So it's an extreme example. He was prosecuted and he was convicted, and that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, very good. Thank you for that. You brought up greyhounds, and as I said, researching for the show was gut-wrenching and awful. The dogfighting seems to be the one that the news agencies jump on all of the time. And statistically, I believe that dogs are most often the ones abused, I believe. Is that correct? Do you believe, to your knowledge?
I believe that when you're talking about
Domesticated animals or home animals.
I don't know any statistics to back that up,
Yeah.
but that would not surprise me.
Okay. When and I'd like to ask you this, Ann, when you come across, or your agency comes across a situation where there has been somebody saying, hey, I think something is going on in there that's not right, and I think that there are animals, what's the process of how you approach that situation, or Ingham County would approach that situation?
Well, generally, we'll get a complaint in from either a neighbor or an anonymous tip, and it could be for a variety of abuse reasons. So we'll send an officer out there to investigate. It could be the dog's outside 24/7. That's what we're getting right now a lot because it's cold out.
Right.
This has been a long, cold winter, as everybody knows. So we'll send an officer out and find out if they have the proper shelter, if they have the proper, food, water, and adequate vet care. And a lot of times when we go out there, they don't. And we try to educate them, and we also have programs where we can help give them free dog houses or free straw.
Okay.
So a lot of times it's education.
Okay.
They don't intentionally mean to abuse the animals, so we'll go out there and we'll give them a dog house and tell them that you can have your dog outside, but it has to be on a tether, X amount of length. It has to have a shelter that has 4 sides and has to be insulated with straw, and
Right.
that be able to get in there, stand up, turn around, move, and lay down.
Right.
And then if that doesn't work, of course we follow up, and if it progresses and progresses, then we talk to Jeff.
Call in the big guys.
And that's right.
And do you find that happens a lot, even after the initial contact and follow-up, that the people just are not compliant? I mean, why would you even have an animal if you're just not going to care for it? I guess I don't understand that concept.
And that question is asked every day at
sure.
our shelter.
Right.
It truly is. It truly is. Generally, it works. The education part works. We're there. We want to help people out, and probably 90% of the time,
Okay.
It works. The 10%, those are the people that just don't care and just don't get it. And that's when we have to bring in the big guns,
Right.
and go that route.
Okay. Julia, my understanding is that the Humane Society is a no-kill shelter. Is that correct?
Well, we're a very low euthanasia shelter.
Okay.
We do provide euthanasia for animals that are very ill or
Okay.
very aggressive. So
Okay.
there's a little bit of a difference between us and what would be classified as a no-kill or no euthanasia shelter.
Okay. The research that I was reading was saying that the northeast of the country
Yes.
seems to be the more progressive on the no-kills, and the southwest, I believe,
Yes.
it would be the other end of that spectrum. Why do you suppose that is the case?
Well, it's interesting. There seems to be a real lag in the spay-neuter message, and for some reason, there's a lag and a bit of responsibility that seems to happen regionally. In fact, we bring puppies up from the southern states because they're doomed to euthanasia, where we hardly get any puppies in our shelter. And I know Ann doesn't get that many puppies in our region as well. And it sounds like an impossible equation to think we need to bring puppies up, but
Right.
actually in the South there's such an overpopulation problem. They're doomed to euthanasia. Every puppy we bring up from southern states, Louisiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, they're all doomed to euthanasia, guaranteed euthanasia down south, and so they're transferred up here where we don't have that many puppies, and frankly we
Right.
adopt them out in a day or two. So there seems to be, and we know that there are a lot of programs that are working to really bring the southern portion of the United States really up to speed with mostly spay-neuter.
Right.
A lot of the shelters down there don't even have spay-neuter clinics or veterinarians. They're just really lagging behind.
Huh.
And I don't know if we know why that is. It's just a phenomenon that we see consistently. And the farther you get north, the more progressive, the more no kills, the more low euthanasia shelters, and the more spay-neuter is happening. And that's really the solution to all the problems we're having.
Yeah, and that's interesting because the guy that runs the Price is Right. I mean, it's please spay and neuter your pets. Isn't that working?
I think California is very progressive.
It depends on what state you're talking about, but there are a lot of great programs now that are encouraging spay neuter down south. It's working. I think in 20 years or 30 years we'll see them catching up to where we are now, but it's going to take some time.
It's good to know that the spay or neuter is the problem because that's what we can't seem to keep under control. I would like to ask a little bit about or touch on the topic of animal hoarding. Because this is something that never even occurred to me until the TV shows came out and you started seeing it, right?
Yeah.
Do we run into that around this area as well?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
It's probably the most common cruelty problem we see. Is hoarding type of problems.
And so then the problem is because they have so many that the conditions in which they live are subpar, and at that point they have to be reclaimed and redistributed. Is that how it works?
Essentially.
It's a vicious cycle, really. What I have seen with hoarding is there's a certain MO. It's generally an older woman, single, with money. And what they do is they start out with all the right intentions.
Right.
And then they just keep going and get overboard to the point where they cannot take care of animals, but they're too either afraid or proud to ask for help.
Right.
Or stubborn.
Or stubborn, yes,
Or
yes.
sometimes there seems to be some mental illness component where they don't even realize there's a problem. We went into a hoarding house and there were dead animals under the couch, and the person wasn't even aware, and I know that's gruesome, but they weren't even aware that there were dead animals under their couch. So it's a very layered problem. It's not just about collecting animals. A lot of times there are mental health issues that keep people from reality. They just don't even realize. If you don't know there's a dead animal under your couch, your problem is beyond. You like animals and you're trying to save them all. I mean, this dog came from a hoarding case, and the situation with she's fine now, but the situation was that there were multiple layered problems in that situation. In fact, 3 of the dogs had passed away from exposure to the extreme temperatures, and that's where the call came from. 3 dogs were found in a dumpster that had been disposed of from this woman's home, and when we got in there, there were multiple animals, there were 70 some animals total in the confiscation. So it's a very complicated issue that's not just about people liking animals too much. And you get them out of there, and a lot of times you go back in a couple years and we're back to the same problem. They've started to collect animals again.
So there's a mental issue going on.
There can be, not always, but we see that frequently.
Yeah, well, Julie, you've pointed out a fact that I am now embarrassed. I did not even introduce your friend that is here with you. I introduced everybody but her.
She doesn't mind. She's apparently going to sleep. She keeps nodding off. She's almost there. This is Daisy. She's a 7-year-old Chihuahua mix, available for adoption at the shelter.
Very good. Well, if anyone's interested in Daisy, please head over to the Capital Area Humane Society and check her out. I'd like to talk also a little bit about animal cruelty laws, and we touched on this a little bit. And I know that the laws differ, home pets versus pets, agricultural pets used for, food, milk, those kinds of things. Do you think that the distinction is enough? Because from what I read, agricultural animals have little to no rights as far as what you can do to them, and even if a pet at home is abused, the likelihood that it's ever going to make it to trial is very difficult. So maybe you could touch a little bit on the specific ways that you would prosecute something like that, and then second, why do the farm animals have less of those protections?
My experience with agricultural animals is practically zero.
Okay.
I rarely come, and I would probably say with Ann, do you have much experience with agricultural?
I actually have more experience, well, not more. I have a lot of experience with agriculture animals, but...
As regarding to the animal shelter?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I really come across it.
Okay.
I think the things to keep in mind are when it comes to owning pets versus raising them for slaughter, for food, skin, whatever you're going to harvest them for, is maintain the golden rule. You treat animals humanely, properly, with care, with love. When you get into something agricultural, since I've never come across those, I've never prosecuted such a case,
Okay.
I would be amiss in answering a question like that.
Sure.
And I don't want to mislead the public in that
Absolutely.
regard. So, but animal control laws, I would imagine it has to do with, as everything, I mentioned the golden rule, there's the green rule. It probably has a lot to do with money.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Ann, if you could maybe speak a little bit to the agricultural side of it.
Sure. Well, animal cruelty laws still cover livestock or agricultural. We'll do a lot of horse cases, goats, sheep, that kind of thing. When you get into like a farm that is for slaughter, like a pig farm or a cattle farm, they're regulated a little different. You get into the USDA gets in there and that kind of thing in the big organizations. But when you have your I don't want to call them a backyard, but gentleman farmer.
Okay. Sure.
They have 5 horses or so, and then it kind of gets into what we were talking about with the hoarding. They get so many they can't take care of. Now they're getting into where they're not feeding them properly, or they're not caring for them properly. They're not providing the adequate vet care. We can go after them under the cruelty statute.
Okay.
Actually, I misunderstood the way you phrased the question. I was thinking when you meant agricultural and saying raising pigs for slaughter as bacon, or is that some sort of thing? I do deal and have dealt with horse abuse, lamb abuse, people who own the gentleman farms, cattle, the big cattle case, the guy who would break the lamb's legs so they wouldn't stray. Yep. So I have dealt with that. I misunderstood your question. So.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Okay.
I apologize, it was confusing.
That's right.
So it basically just comes down to they want to take on more so they can make more money, but then they do it without the proper resources. Is that kind of the situation?
We see that. We see that. A lot of times, though, we see people getting in over their heads.
Right.
Livestock, what most people get livestock for is to reproduce and have more and sell more,
Right.
And that's the general idea with cattle, pigs, sheep, that kind of thing. With horses, you don't see that so much. Horses are more recreational unless you get into where the racehorse folks. We
Right.
have some thoroughbred farmers, or not farmers, but we have some thoroughbred farms. We have some harness racing folks around. They get into, it costs them more to feed them than they're making on the track. So then, this guy doesn't get as much as that guy because,
Right.
it gets bad. It gets bad.
It's unbelievable. I was telling them earlier, just before you got here, that my wife and I rehab wildlife, and we were speaking about that. In fact, I think we have a picture or two of me and Reggie at the beginning of the show. There he is. So that's Reggie. He's our male surrogate. And
Squishy.
Squishy is the female. Now, Squishy has the mentality of a raccoon. So we don't get pictures like this.
So she's really smart.
Right. Reggie had a gash in his head from his eye to his ear when we got him, and his eyes were not open, and he still had his umbilical cord. And so,
no kidding.
we just tendered him up and hoped for the best, and he ended up making it. But he is brain damaged, and because he's brain damaged, he is automatically a euthanization candidate. We used our 2 spaces of our 2 species that were 2 separate species that we could keep quickly because he is damaged. He's so friendly, and literally he doesn't know how to hiss. He doesn't bite. He just licks like a cat. It's really, really weird. But Squishy, on the other hand, she is a typical raccoon. No petting. No, she'll tolerate us for food. But she's the one that really, when the raccoons come in, she really pulls them under and takes them and gets them more of that aggressive nature, which is a good way to go. So maybe you could talk about the wild animal aspect of your job, because I know, as I've said, some of your officers have brought us raccoons that have been found in parks, and they are super cute when they're little.
Yep.
And people think, we're just going to take it home and it's going to be wonderful, and then all of a sudden it isn't.
Yes. Well, we've actually gotten away from wildlife, handling wildlife.
Okay.
It was probably a couple years before I started. We don't have the license to handle the wildlife. We don't have the authority to handle the wildlife. So we've kind of gotten away from that. That being said, we still will test for rabies. We get bats in. Usually it peaks in the summertime, of course, when everybody's out and about and bats are out and about. But we do test for rabies. That's about our extent with wildlife.
Just to know where the rabies are at what point. And I had heard a fact. Do you know that I had heard that there hasn't been any raccoon rabies in Michigan for many, many years. Are you familiar with that statistic?
There hasn't been the raccoon strain of rabies, but there have been raccoons that are positive for rabies. It's a little confusing, but there's generally 3 or 4 strains of rabies. There's bat rabies, skunk rabies, fox rabies. There's more than 4. There's raccoon rabies, coyote, so on and so forth. Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York have the raccoon strain.
Okay.
But we don't in Michigan. We were very, very vigilant with vaccinating with the baits and all that to keep that strain out.
Gotcha.
That, like I said,
so it's a strain thing,
it's a strain.
Okay. Well,
We've still had positive raccoons that had skunk rabies.
Gotcha. Okay. I would like to remind all of our viewers that this is a call-in show. If you have a question for the panel or you just want to make a comment on what we're talking about, please feel free to call in. You can do that at 517-349-1232. We also have a Twitter handle, so feel free to use that as well. It's @HomeTV. I'd like to talk a little bit about how the United States policies versus the UK's policies on how animals are both treated and or not abused. What are some of the reasons that you think that the UK has gone far ahead of us in what is acceptable behavior for an animal, and why are we not figuring that out?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough thing. I know that even the companion animal world is a lot different in the UK than it is for the United States, but I have no idea.
Okay.
You know, culturally, I'm not immersed enough to know what they're doing differently than we are. But I think we could learn some things.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of the items when you go through facts about animal abuse, they would say the UK's policies would not allow this to happen, but it still happens here in the United States.
Sure.
So, excuse me, I thought I would throw it out there.
It's a mixed bag. You have to remember too when you talk UK, then you have Europe, Spain. Look at Spain. You still have bullfighting there, which is a horrible, absolutely horrible. Grotesque, gruesome sight, and it's completely legal there.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
That's right, because they just...
It's not the UK, but close enough.
Right. Well, it's pretty close.
Right.
Some of the most inhumane stuff that I found would have been the laboratory issue for animals that are tested for various items. I don't know that happens a lot here in Ingham County. I don't know if there's factories here. But I wonder how many of those animals, actually get to have some sort of a normal life after the testing has occurred. And are you aware of any programs that allow animals to come out of a testing environment and work their way into some sort of a program?
I know there are university programs where research animals are then adopted out, and I can't speak to individual programs, but I know that there are some very responsible researchers out there, and they do have maybe they're breeding beagles for a specific scientific purpose, and after they're finished with that, whatever it is, then the animals go through an adoption process. I mean, I think it's probably as varied as anything else. There's really good and there's really bad versions of that story. And,
right.
And I can't think of anything in Ingham County or anything locally that's happened that's raised our eyebrows in terms of research animals. But it's really controversial. I think social media and a lot of the awareness that's happened has made it a lot harder for people to mistreat animals, because with a lot of the like food source, certain restaurants would purchase their beef from a certain slaughterhouse, and they're getting video and putting it out there and really starting to expose some of this mistreatment, especially in the food industry. We're seeing a lot of people going undercover per se and
Right.
exposing that these animals are being treated brutally before slaughter, during the slaughter process. So I think that's all helping.
Right.
You know, when you get back to research, I don't know of any local issue we're having with research animals, but I know that there's still, you know, up to recent history, shelters who sell animals to research
Right.
that aren't available for adoption. To me, that's a bigger issue because there's some pretty nasty things and pretty low quality people out there purchasing animals for research purposes. And that's, I don't know, are there any shelters left in Michigan that are selling to Class B dealers?
Not that I'm
It's
aware
gotten
of.
way
of
down
any.
there, but
Because-
until
Not in
recently,
Michigan.
there were 3 left in the state, and I wonder, I think that maybe we've gotten through all that, but
Right.
in the last 5 years, shelters were still actively selling to researchers who were using animals in unethical ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Yikes. Maybe you can talk, Julie, just a little bit too about the main animal intake that you
Sure.
guys have over there and how you handle it. What times of the year is it worse? What time of the year is it better? Those kinds of things.
Sure. I mean, we're full all the time, every day. So I think it's hard to say there's one time of year, but there's certainly the classic kitten season, which Ann knows about fully. But a lot of people don't know that cats are seasonally bioestrous, and that's a fancy way of saying they all come into heat at the same time. It's like one big party. All the cats come into heat, and subsequently all the kittens are born at the same time.
Okay.
And people think, well, why is that a problem? Well, then it's just a supply and demand issue. I mean, all of a sudden, boxes and boxes of kittens are pouring into shelters, and it causes a multidimensional problem because not only do we have too many kittens, but then nobody wants adult cats because all the kittens are available.
Ah.
So you have an issue with too many kittens and nobody wanting adults because everybody wants the babies. So
Right.
when you talk about, you know, the incoming animals and when are busy times for cats, it's always about April when the kittens start to pour in. And because every mama cat will typically have 2 litters of kittens, we'll see that pretty much trend from April all the way to December. And if you want a Christmas kitten, you're not going to get one because frankly, they aren't born that time of year. So
Right.
it's interesting. People come in this time of year looking for kittens. We don't have any, and they think that the whole community's out of kittens, that we've solved the problem. And it's no, they're all in their mom's tummies right now. It's
Right.
the process, it's the way cats work. But certainly springtime through summer for cats is our busiest time. We're full with dogs every day. So, you know, people constantly get rid of their dogs for every reason imaginable. So I don't think, if I asked Ann when her slow time was, she'd probably laugh at me and I would laugh at her for the same. But when
Right.
it comes to cats,
Right.
there's definitely a peak season for kittens,
Sure.
and that's a problem for shelters, any shelter.
Yeah, gotcha. Maybe, Ann, I'd like to ask a little bit about exotic animals because I know that there are specific animals you can own with a special license, and then I know there are animals you absolutely cannot own, no matter what.
Sure.
Do you come across that often?
We do. We get our fair share of alligators.
What?
Yes.
Really?
We've had quite a few alligators, actually. Anywhere from 1 foot to 4 foot. A lot of times they end up in retention ponds. Those are the
Oh.
easy ones, the retention ponds. When they end up into like Lansing, that's a little more difficult. Knock on wood, we haven't had that yet, but people can buy those. They get them over the internet. They buy them at reptile shows, and then Junior gets too big for the bathtub, and
Yeah.
they let him go.
They let them go
And,
outside.
yeah.
Now, is that legal for them to get an animal like that?
Right now, there's nothing that says they cannot get an alligator. You said about animals that are illegal.
Yeah.
Any animal that's endangered, you have to have a permit, and you're not going to get one. Nobody's. I mean, you
Right.
might because you do the wildlife
Right.
and you know how to go through that process, but your average Joe is not going to get a permit for a lion or a tiger.
Right.
And in Michigan, there are specific laws, and Jeff can touch on it. The carnivore law. You cannot have a lion, tiger, or bear. Oh my.
Oh, okay.
you really can't. You
Okay,
can't.
well, that's kind of good to
Yeah.
know. I mean,
Now, is there people out there that have them? Sure. They're. I'm sure they're there.
well, it's funny because I ran across this guy. I think we went to buy a desk for a computer many years back, but he had this huge pen, and I said, well, what was that? And he said, well, that's where I kept my leopard. And I said, a
Nice.
leopard? And he's like, yeah, it was a black leopard, and I had her for 12 years, and she passed away, and it was so nonchalant, like, yeah, it was where the leopard lived.
Yeah.
So obviously that was out of compliance for him to have a
Sure.
leopard.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
I
Definitely.
came across a more unusual story recently. I'm still trying to verify if it's true, but a good friend of mine, she told me that her mother had a neighbor, I believe it was in the Owasso area, and they noticed some sort of creature going back and forth in a natural pond there. It survived the winter, and they finally caught it. And she says it was a Komodo dragon. Now,
wow.
did you hear about this?
No, I haven't.
I didn't know that Komodo dragons can survive the
didn't-
cold, but she swears it's true. So I'm going to look into that. I'll give you updates.
Yeah, I would be interested to know, because that's like the one
Komodo
animal
dragon.
I would love to see.
Komodo dragon
in
in
person.
Michigan.
Wow, that's very cool. Maybe, while I've got you, Jeffrey, you can talk about when a prosecution goes through and the party is found guilty. What are some of the penalties that get handed down? I mean, obviously, it's a severe. How severe was the issue? But are they strong enough? I mean, are we making it unadvisable to be abusive to animals with our punishment system?
As all laws, I think they always need to be looked at and updated. Mr. Dunnings is always big on that, talking to the legislature about revising laws. In my opinion, some of the laws we have on animal torture and killing are very lenient. I belong to the animal section of the State Bar of Michigan. I'm chairman of the board in that committee. We all believe that some of the laws regarding killing and torturing are not nearly severe enough. In Michigan, when you are sentenced on a felony, so for example, if you kill or are involved in dogfighting, the Michigan legislature, they look at your prior criminal history and the seriousness of the current offense that you were convicted of. And it's a point system, and you add up the points. And if you have a certain amount of points, you get more jail time. And for killing and torturing an animal, there are no points. So that's something I think that the legislature can look at. That's something that's been discussed a lot of times myself with the animal control. But killing and torturing an animal, using it for any means that you wish, using a gun, a knife, whatever, what have you, on an animal, that's no more severe than doing anything else. So that's something that I think the law needs to be looked at. What else can you do when a person is convicted is a lot of things. We can ask for restitution. The animal control, they can ask for restitution regarding the housing of the animal. If they had to take it to see a doctor, a veterinarian, the person can be sent to jail, to prison. They can be fined. They can be ordered not to have animals while they're on probation. For a felony, that can be up to 5 years. And if it's a misdemeanor, they can be ordered not to have animals for 2 years. The court can also have them be psychologically examined and counseled and treated as necessary.
Okay, this point system thing just threw me there for just a second. So it's illegal to abuse an animal, but you
Correct.
don't accrue a negative point if you are convicted of doing so.
That's correct. For example, if you were to, say, shoot someone, and you have no prior criminal record, when you look at what's called the POV, the point offense variable, when the judge looks at the point system to try to determine how much time you're going to spend in jail or prison, you would get points for using a firearm. You would get more points if it was, say, a shotgun. You would get points for injuring that person severely. If they had psychological damage, you would get points if you obstructed the police in the apprehension of yourself. If you kill or torture an animal, there are no points. There's nothing in the POV system, in the point offense variable system, that allows points to be added to make your penalty, or make the system more harsh for your crime that you committed.
I am shocked that that's the case. Okay, so yeah, I think that should be changed. Wow, because if it's illegal, you would think that you get some sort of a point because it's against the law,
Right.
in some way. Okay.
In one sense, it's the conviction is some points, but I mean, when you're talking about animals, there's nothing specific in the offense variable system in the guidelines that allow for killing or torturing an animal.
That is awful news. Just to finish that out, do you remember what the Greyhound, the student with the Greyhounds, what he is serving? Do you remember his conviction?
He was sentenced to, I believe, 5 years probation, but he didn't serve much jail or prison time, which we were disappointed with the sentence. I believe he's living out of state now. He is not allowed to own animals. It's been a couple of years since his case is in the system, but
Yeah.
so far as I know, usually I would hear something, and if anything negative has happened, but I haven't heard anything about him
Okay.
since.
Didn't he get restitution, big time restitution?
He was ordered to pay restitution, correct? to the animal shelter, and there's a lot of money involved in that. I believe a local veterinarian adopted the surviving greyhound.
Yeah, she did. And it's still her mascot at
That's
her,
right.
at her clinic.
That's good. It's nice to focus on some of the positive aspects of this whole thing. When you get animals into the Ingham County shelter, do you work at all with the Humane Society and animal transfers? So in other words, if you get a bunch of animals in, do you help each other out as far as back and forth?
As much as possible, we
Okay.
do. We definitely do.
Okay.
We try very hard to work together. I think we both have a lot of the same problems. I mean,
Right.
she's full, I'm full. So, you know, a lot of times when they need help and they're full, we are full too. But we work a lot together with spay neuter initiatives. You know, wherever we can help out. I think it's really important for, you know, Humane Societies and animal controls to not duplicate services and
Right.
to provide resources to one another as is appropriate to get the job done.
What's the process if a dog is found running free? Is there a period of time where you have to hold that animal and see if you can find them, or hopefully the owner is trying to find them, and how long is that, and then what happens to the animal?
Well, when we get a stray animal, either a dog or a cat in, and it does not have any ID, it has no collar, it has no microchip, nothing, zilch. We have to hold that animal for a minimum of 4 business days. If that animal has ID, a collar with a tag or a microchip, then we have to hold it 7 business days and notify the owner. If the owner still doesn't come forward, then after that it becomes technically the county property, if you will, for lack of a better term, and then we'll assess it and put it up for adoption.
Okay, very cool.
We try to stress, and I know the Humane Society does, you know, microchipping. We offer clinics and offer that because that's permanent ID. You have to have a dog license. There's no way around that. You have to have a dog license if the dog's over 4 months. But if your dog loses its collar, when it got loose, it got hooked up on a branch or something, or somebody took it off.
Yeah.
You know, it's gone. But if you microchip your pets, and it could be, we've microchipped horses, we've microchipped parrots, we've microchipped not alligators, but pretty
Right,
much
right.
everything else. No, not yet, not yet.
Never say never.
Well, and as I recall, because we also got a cat from you a little while ago, and the service was very cheap, 25, 50 bucks or something.
$25.
Yeah.
Once a month at our outreach center, which is downtown Lansing on Saginaw, the first Friday of every month, we'll have a microchip and vaccination clinic. So it's $10. And,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it is cheap. It's very cheap, and it gives you a peace of mind. And a nice thing, another bonus about it, I like to tell people, is, and heaven forbid it ever happens, but if somebody steals your pet, that is permanent ID that nobody even knows is there, and you
Right.
can't remove it. That's permanent ID. That shows that you're your animal.
Which
We've
will-
been able to solve criminal cases with pet chip. We've had a case where a woman swore that someone had kept her dog. This was a few years ago, and a person had stole it. She had a microchip. We were able to rule that person out. It wasn't her dog. It looked like it, but it had a chip and took care of it.
Interesting. Now, is the chip always placed in the same spot? Okay.
Right
Yes.
between the shoulders.
Okay. Oh, on the on the back.
Yeah,
Okay.
Everybody has one.
All right. Gotcha. When it comes to the dog fighting issue, I have heard people talking that they have seen it in and around this area, which, you know, it shocks me. Obviously, the Michael Vick was the maybe the most famous of the dog fighting issues. Do you get dog fighting calls, abuse calls? Okay. And this
Certainly.
is usually somebody who's hearing this horrific thing happen, or they just suspect, or, you know, in other words, can it just be hearsay? Can someone just go, I heard someone say that they saw someone do this and it might be happening over here? Is that enough for you to go on?
Sure.
Okay.
It's enough for us to go investigate.
Right.
Okay.
When it gets to me, it's a different story.
Right.
They
You've got
can-
to have.
You can have anonymous tips all the time, and oftentimes we do. Regarding dogfighting, there is dogfighting in Ingham County. I will say I'm not aware of any right now, but we are very, very aggressive in going after dogfighters, without question. And because we're so aggressive, especially with my boss, Mr. Dunnings, he talks about not tolerating it. I know the Ingham County Animal Shelter, they don't tolerate it. I haven't heard about it in a while. She hears more of the hearsay and what you call the snitches and people
Oh, yeah.
who are upset. There are a million reasons why people will want to bring to the attention law enforcement about dog fighting. They may be upset they weren't paid. One of the things is that whenever you have dog fighting, you will find drugs and money, because it's all about gambling. You almost certainly never have one without the other. So it's a very vicious, I don't even want to call it sport, but crime. I have seen videos of one. My first trial that I did with a dog fighter, Delton Jones, there was a video of it, and it's a very gruesome sight. Absolutely gruesome. Yep.
It's the worst thing you'll ever witness.
Right.
Yeah, and I can tell you I don't want to witness it. That's not something I would ever want to see. So it's a money thing. I mean, because we're all sitting here looking at that act, like, what would bring somebody to want to do something like this? But then there's the other side. I think the producer said earlier, there's two types of people. There's the people that will kick the dog to the curb, and then there's the people that will pick the dog up from the curb and take them back into their house and take care of them.
Right.
So where is that disconnect? I mean, is there ever any psychological aspect of your prosecuting that because we hear stories about, when young kids hurt animals, they're more likely to abuse family members or...
All true.
So what do you suppose that disconnect is?
I'm not sure, but I do know that, and it's proven. One of the few things that we say is nothing is certain, but it's very high degree of probability that if you abuse animals as a child, then you will abuse humans as an adult. We know that from FBI studies, psychologists, psychiatrists, that abuse to animals early on, torturing, killing, burning, they're going to have problems. All the serial killers that you've come across that we know about, they almost all abused animals as children. As a juvenile in Michigan, and this is where we are also very progressive, a court, when a child is suspected of or convicted of abusing an animal, the court can order, and I believe it's mandatory, that they order psychological testing for that child. Because we know where it goes.
Right.
We know what happens. We know when they get to it as an adult, they are going to be a domestic violence abuser.
Yeah.
They are going to abuse spouses, girlfriends, their children, and it's a very, very, not only a slippery slope, but we know where it goes. So there is certainly some sort of psychological issue that we try to address early in our youth in the criminal justice system.
That's good to know, because that was a big thing too that I saw, and especially even mothers that have surrendered to abuse shelters. Always 98% of the time say that the abuser used the animal
Absolutely.
as a tool,
As a threat.
Yep.
and abused it as
We have cases going on like that now in this county of women saying, I didn't want to leave, but he threatened to kill my dog every single day. He said, if you ever leave me, I'll kill this dog, I'll do it. And we have that. That happens all the time.
Ah, what an uplifting show this is.
On that note, I do want to add that all my officers, animal control officers, have been cross-trained with Child Protective Services. So when we're in there and we pick up an animal that has been what we suspect abused, and we look around when we're in there, and because a lot of times we're the first responders.
Okay.
We'll see maybe signs of child abuse. We have a direct line to Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services that we say, hey, we think there might be something you might want to check out here. We just took out a dog with 2 broken legs, and there's a child in there that we're concerned about.
Right.
So.
What is your jurisdiction when you go in? I mean, you have to have a warrant to enter somebody's home, but if you send an officer out and they notice something, is that enough that they can enter the home, or how does that part of the law work?
There are quite a few ways. Usually, whenever in doubt, whenever a law enforcement officer is in doubt about any someone's property or their curtilage, where the curtilage is an area immediately surrounding the home, or the actual home itself, you have to have probable cause. And in order to go into someone's house, their curtilage, their property, you need a warrant. If law enforcement or someone from Ann's department or a police department, if they suspect animal abuse and they're not sure if they can go into the house, they come to us. And if we think there's probable cause to get a search warrant and a judge believes so, then they can then enter the house. Many times, most people will just, what's called consent. You knock on the door and say, hey, can we have a look around? And almost always that works. Am I right? That works
Knock
almost.
and talk.
Knock and talk. You
Knock
talk
and
and they
talk.
say, look, come on in. And most of the times, the abuse that we talked about earlier, the killing, the torturing for evil purposes, a little bit rare, but more importantly, you find the neglect is the larger issue.
Yeah.
And so a person is not necessarily going to be hostile to an animal control officer. They say, we hear there's a dog barking, it's whining. Do you mind if we come in? And sure, come on in. And then that's where you discover if things are really out of control. And Ann talked about, we counsel them, we educate them.
Right.
And if it keeps going on, then
Yeah. Then we know.
Then
the
we
rest
know
of
where
the
to go.
story there.
Correct.
And I'm glad that we keep pointing out the fact that the neglect is really just as bad as any of the other stuff, because that's really where it's happening, and that's probably where people don't think as much about it. We do have a question. Comes in from Alex in East Lansing. Some people say that breeding animals could be harmful since there are so many without homes as it is. What are your feelings on breeders and puppy mills? I bet you Julia can go on for an hour on this topic.
Well, I mean, I think you have to distinguish, because there's certainly a huge difference between puppy mills and breeders. There are a lot of people out there who care very much about dogs that breed dogs, and there are people who do it well, who do it right. When you're in animal welfare, it's a little hard to accept dog breeding on the whole, because you see so much the results. And people argue with me, well, you're not going to find golden retrievers in a shelter. You're not going to find this purebred dog in a shelter. But about 25% of the dogs that come to shelters are purebreds. So, as a whole, we caution people, if you're considering breeding animals, that breeding has a consequence. And, for every dog that's bred, another dog's losing a home, potentially.
Right.
So, it's a slippery slope to say breeding's okay. I think that there are well-intended, good breeders out there promoting their breed and doing good things. But a lot of people who are breeding dogs aren't doing those things. And when we go cross over into puppy mills, I mean, Ann can speak to this too. I mean, puppy mills are not breeders. Puppy mills are manufacturing animals for one purpose, and that's for financial gain. And the neglect of these situations, I mean, we've rated puppy mills of 300 plus animals, and I mean, the neglect is unimaginable. I mean, toenails grown into pads, their whole underside scalded with urine, so their flesh is bare and burned. And you can go on, and all these folks here have seen the results of puppy mills. So certainly puppy mills, and the puppy mill laws are getting stronger, and there's more and more effort to close down puppy mills and to address the atrocity that is puppy mills. So I don't think you can lump puppy mills and breeders in one pile. I think responsible breeders need to be aware of what's going on in shelters. I think they operate in their breeder world, and they think that what they're doing is great because they're furthering their breed, and most breeders care very much about the type of dog they're breeding. But we would like to see more commonality, breeders embracing the fact that sheltering is a problem and animals in shelters are a problem, and being very responsible with their practices. When people breed dogs, ultimately some dogs are going to die as a result of that. And we've, over history, the number of euthanasias nationally for dogs and cats goes down every year. So, there is progress. Sheltering of animals is becoming a happier thing to talk about than it has been, say, 20 years ago, when millions and millions and millions of animals died every year in shelters. But I think that for those who breed, and Ann can share her thoughts too, that caution and awareness, be aware of how many dogs are in a shelter before you breed an excessive. If you breed once every 5 years, that's not really hurting a lot. If you're breeding multiple litters a year, then you're probably contributing to a problem in your community, which is too many dogs or cats.
I'm a staunch believer in rescuing an animal. I will never, ever buy an animal from
And
a
only
breeder.
30% of people in the whole United States get their pets from shelters. I mean, it's an overwhelming statistic for us, because we only have 30% of the population even walking in our door to adopt. So it's shocking, and I think people need to know that. I think people need to know that there's nothing wrong with dogs in shelters or cats in shelters, that people assume there must be something wrong with Daisy. Why is she in a shelter? Well, she's in a shelter because she was a victim of neglect, and most of the animals are in shelters because their owner died or because something happened in their owner's life that doesn't relate to the quality or the goodness of the animal there. So people need to think about shelters more, and adoption is a great choice.
I'll throw it over. Believe it or not, we only have about 7 minutes left in the show, but I will throw that over to you, the puppy mills and the breeders thing. Do you have anything to add to that?
Julia covered it, spot on, but I would like to add that there's some legislation right now in I think I forget, House Bill 5
Yeah.
something, I forget what it is
Yeah.
exactly. But it's going to regulate puppy mills more, which is going to give us, the animal shelters and the animal controls, more of a bite, pun intended, on this, to control it. Because what happens is you get these puppy mills versus backyard breeders, and then legitimate breeders. That's how I kind of lump them in. And your puppy mills, they're out for $1,
Right.
and it's the flavor of the month. They might this month breed Chihuahuas. Next month, oh my goodness gracious, everybody wants a Saint Bernard because Walt Disney just came out with a movie that has a Saint Bernard. So bam, that puppy mill will switch that fast and be able to start producing like cars,
Right.
puppies. I mean, it's sad.
Unbelievable.
But there is legislation out there
Okay.
that's coming.
So
that'll help.
And Jeff, have you dealt with any puppy
yeah.
mill cases?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so
Oh, yeah.
you're familiar with it as well.
We had a case here 5-6 years ago. I can't recall her name right now, so I don't want to botch it. But she owned a puppy mill. We seized, I believe, 68. Do you remember what they were?
Australian Shepherds.
Australian Shepherds. That's right. And she had a puppy mill, and she was an older lady. Shocking. She had money, and it was all for money. And hers was a situation where, again, she kept breeding and breeding and breeding, and it got out of control. And we had videos and photos of that. She was convicted of 6 counts of animal abuse, and things spun out of control. Ingham County had looked at her for a couple of years. 1 year was fine, and then the next year, it was out of control.
Yeah. I'm thankful that you're on top of all of that, because the idea of what a puppy mill is just awful. And I can also speak to the purebreds, because we adopted from Ingham County a purebred Bangor house cat not too
Yep.
long ago. So there are purebreds that are out there in the shelters.
We get quite a few.
Yeah. So just for people who are wondering, just don't forget about the shelters, and remember that there are animals in there too. We have just under 5 minutes left. Maybe each one of you could go through and just give us your best case scenario for helping your specific cause. What would be the one thing that would help you in your job the most?
Wow, 5 minutes.
Wow. Yeah, I need an hour.
Right, oh, well,
That's a separate show.
That's show number 2, I suppose. But spays and neutering, like what development would be the most helpful, do you think?
Wow, I mean, that's a huge question. There are so many critical issues in animal sheltering. I mean, right now, the 2 biggest issues we face are surrounding the pit bull dog and surrounding cats, feral cats, free-roaming cats, the cat population issues. So, I mean, if we could address, I can't even say one, the 2 critical issues and the 2 things that would make my job easier is if we could get a handle on cat overpopulation.
Yeah.
I mean, they say there's 50 cats for every 1 space in a shelter throughout the nation to house the population of cats that currently exists. So people are constantly like, why are you full? Well, there's 50 cats for every cage I have in my shelter to put a cat in. It's that grand. It's that big of a problem. So, we have some aggressive spay neuter programs for cats right now, and they're working, but to take away the problem would be somehow to get a better handle on cat overpopulation. And when you look at the dog issues, the pit bull issue, the discrimination we place on that breed, so many people focus on being afraid of them instead of solving the problem. 99% of pit bulls are friendly, safe dogs, but we're so afraid of that 1% that we can't forget about it and we can't find solutions. Everyone's making decisions about breed bans, and everyone's acting out of fear. No one's acting out of knowledge. So I think to change people's attitudes, to open people's minds, we sent our staff to California to be trained on how to evaluate pit bulls. So, we want knowledge to do best with these dogs. I would love for people to step beyond that stereotype of the pit bull's going to eat my child, the pit bull's going to attack me, to what can we do to place safe pit bulls in homes? What can we do to determine if the unsafe dogs and get them out of the community so that people don't have to be afraid? But that applies to any breed, not just pit bulls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to do a ban is a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It's been proven not to work. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that about the pit bulls, because I have lots of experience with them, and they're very, very sweet animals. Jeffrey, any one item that would help you out?
One item that would
We got about 2 minutes left.
One item that would make our job easier at the Ingham County Prosecutor's Office is if people see a crime, and they should report it. Simple as that. And they should be willing to testify. Come to court, tell the jury what happened. I cannot tell you how many times, and when I come across information in cases from Ann, dogfighting. There are so many people who report dogfighting, but they say, I don't want to get involved. Don't take my name down. It's happening at this area, on this street, this house, this time of day. But I don't want my name in any police report. I don't want my name, I don't want anybody calling me. And all we can do is investigate. And if they don't find anything there, and dog fighters are good about hiding things, then we can't do anything. So come forward, let the police know.
Stand up for the
Stand
animal.
up.
Yeah, very good. I would like to thank all of you so much for being here. I'll reintroduce you. Julia Palmer, she's the president and CEO of the Capital Area Humane Society.
Thank you.
Ann Burns, the interim director at the Ingham County Animal Control and Shelter. Thank you. And of course, Jeffrey Cruz, assistant prosecutor at the Ingham County office. Thank you so much for being here as well.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to just end on a quote, and I don't even remember who the person said it was, but he said, you can judge a society and a people by the way that they treat their animals. And it's just a very good quote. Thank you all very much for joining us. Once again, we'll see you next time. Thank you.